did you do it? Why did you do it?
Never stop wishing, Flapjack, and all your dreams will come true. Even the scary ones?
Yes.
There are many things in certain cartoons that I've often found disturbing. However, because they are cartoons, sometimes there is a disconnect we create in our heads. They look like cartoons, so we don't think about the negative implications and the moral depravity of the worlds they exist within. But there was something different about Gravity Falls in particular. No matter how much I tried to ignore it, I couldn't help but think about just how creepy and horrific this universe truly was. Maybe it's because of the darker themes, or maybe it's due to the various alternative media that directly interacted with us as viewers. One thing was for sure, it really put into perspective that the universe of Gravity Falls has many hidden horrors worth discussing. Because Gravity Falls is a cartoon, there are many elements we don't really take as seriously because of it. However, when we take a step back and really think about it, we realize just how messed up the events are, but also how much mortal danger the characters were in this whole time. For example, Gravity Falls as a location exists because an alien spaceship crash landed and killed many of the occupants. So inherently the location is built on the deaths of many creatures. From then on, many supernatural entities have flocked to Gravity Falls as a result, becoming permanent residents of the region. We don't think about it, but this actually does make Gravity Falls extremely dangerous to live in. There is no doubt in my mind that many have been horrifically murdered and torn apart by the many strange creatures that reside in the region. However, because Gravity Falls was a children's cartoon, there was no way they'd ever insinuate or hint towards a death toll. However, we can say for certain that people have died here throughout the years. This is proven when you take a look at just how many times Dipper and Mabel have met some kind of unfortunate end. Yeah, many people don't know this, but Dipper and Mabel are meant to die in many moments throughout the show, but survive on pure luck. According to Bill Cipher, there are infinite timelines, and in a vast majority, or even all of them, the Pines family suffer from horrific deaths or end up succumbing to a particular villain, either at the hands of Bill himself or the many supernatural threats in Gravity Falls. I think it's this revelation that makes you realize that Gravity Falls as a location isn't really as fun or adventurous as the show makes it seem. It's a very dangerous place, one in which, if you're not careful, you're likely to succumb to its many dangers.
Oh, Gravity Falls, it is good to be back!
Now, there's no doubt that Bill Cipher is an evil, sadistic, and cruel entity that revels in death and destruction. Of course, this depravity is often glossed over in the show, but when you really think about it, you realize just how messed up his backstory is and his existence itself. Bill, from what we can understand, killed everyone in his original dimension. It's unclear why he did this, but from what we can understand, they were people who lacked ambition or dreams, and Bill, who had grand goals and plans for his life, had enough of them and decided to massacre his entire race.
Then we're up. The sky is on fire. Everything is burning. How could this happen?
Based on very creepy dialogue as well, it seems that Bill actually killed his race by burning them all alive, setting fire to the entire dimension and turning everything to ash. Now, there are very clear signs that Bill regretted his actions and seeks to completely forget what he did. However, this remorse doesn't really take away from the fact that he is as malevolent as they come.
How about instead I shuffle the functions of every hole in your face?
I really like scenes such as this one, which shows how Bill is very fascinated by the mutilation of living beings and finds amusement in how he can twist the human form in grotesque ways. While this does look disturbing in an actual cartoon, it gets even creepier when you see something like this in a more realistic reality. It's clear that Gravity Falls did take place within the context of a realistic-looking world. Okay, yeah, obviously the show is an animated series, so it doesn't make sense for me to say that the show took place in a realistic world, though it's not far-fetched that the animated style of the series is just the way the story was presented and is not necessarily a reflection of the show's own reality. Yeah, I know that made no sense, but you'll understand what I meant soon enough. We know that the show did take place within a realistic looking world, thanks to many photos from the Book of Bill and the official This Is Not a Website page, which depicts many elements of the Gravity Falls world in a much more realistic lens. In one video, we see this very realistic depiction of the Mystery Shack. The footage is blurry and shaky as if taken from a camcorder of some sort. This here is clearly meant to be the Gravity Falls world within a more realistic looking world rather than something animated, which creates a strange, kind of uncanny effect from the viewer. We see another example of this within other videos and photos.
No, you're killing me. That's true.
In one video, we see a boat on the ocean, and in the background, we can hear Grunkle Stan speaking to someone, which is clearly meant to be Ford, meaning that this scene depicts their adventures together on the boat as seen in the show. There was also an official Gravity Falls related Twitter page called Oregon Parks Department, which served as an in-universe organization that managed parks in Oregon. It's clear that many of the photographs are taken within Gravity Falls, meaning that these do serve as definitive proof that the Gravity Falls story does exist in a realistic looking reality, and the animated show was just the way the story was presented. Now, because Gravity Falls is in a realistic looking world, it does give us some new perspective when it comes to the many supernatural creatures that exist. We didn't think about it due to the show's cartoonish nature, but many of the supernatural elements present in the series would be extremely terrifying in real life. We do have a good indication on what some of these creatures would look like in real life. There's of course this skeleton of one of the gnomes. It's a very surreal looking image. We've gotten so used to seeing them in their cartoon forms, so witnessing them within this more realistic lens makes them look a lot more terrifying. There's also creatures like the land orca who wander the forest on certain occasions. It's images like this that really makes you remember that Gravity Falls isn't really the fun and adventurous location we've come to expect from the show. It's an extremely dangerous and hostile environment that harbors creatures beyond our nightmares, ones that would not flinch at tearing you apart. Now sure, imagining and seeing Gravity Falls characters within a more realistic lens is very unsettling. However, there is one particular character that really intrigued me the most when it came to seeing them in a realistic world. However, it's also strangely confusing at the same time. Bill Cipher's design is pretty simple. He's literally a triangle with an eye, arms, legs, a bow tie, and a top hat. Bill Cipher within the context of the Gravity Falls show fits pretty well into the world. I mean, the show is animated, so an expressive cartoon floating triangle isn't really the most ridiculous thing we've seen. However, there was a question I had about Bill Cipher that inspired the whole premise of this video. Would Bill Cipher look realistic in the real world? I know the question does sound weird, but it's really been bugging me. As we explored before, Gravity Falls does exist in some kind of realistic world, and thus many of the creatures look realistic as well. Very creepy and uncanny. It made me think to myself, how creepy would Bill Cipher be if he came into our reality? Would his triangle body be made out of realistic looking brick? Or would it be more like shiny and smooth metal? Would his eyeballs be like a biological eye? Would his eyebrows be like real physical hair? And how would it feel to touch his black hands? Basically, I always wondered if Bill Cipher in the real world would look something like this. A very creepy and unsettling looking entity that would cause people nightmares for years to come, especially when you take a look at his henchmen, the henchmaniacs, who in certain photos also take on this very realistic appearance. However, when I thought about it a bit more, I realized that Bill would not actually look realistic in our world at all, and I think potentially that is scarier in a way. Think about it for a second. Bill Cipher is and was originally a 2D being who resided within a 2D universe. According to Bill Cipher himself, it's not entirely possible for humans to comprehend what a 2D verse is like. However, there have been many forms of media that have attempted to depict the appearance of a 2D world.
You're only a square!
However, these are simply depictions that in Bill's eyes aren't exactly accurate to how he experienced life. However, it's because our concept of a 2D world only exists within artistic depictions that it's more likely that Bill in the real world would still look very cartoonish. 2D depictions of life, of course, would be made up of simple shapes. We cannot feasibly imagine the idea of a 2D being having fat, muscle, or tissue. They would simply be glorified drawings. So, if a 2D being then were to come into our world, they'd keep the same form as they did in the 2D world. A flat shape with features that look like they were drawn onto them with nothing feasibly organic. That's why Bill himself in the real world would still look like a cartoon. This is not just a form of my own headcanon. There's plenty of proof throughout the Book of Bill and the website that this is the case. In those materials, the editors and the artists go a long way to portray Bill as cartoonish within a realistic looking world. We even see Bill directly interacting in some of the artwork and photographs, such as this one where a government worker is tormented by Bill. Despite knowing he would look like a cartoon in our world, there's still something very creepy about that thought. I especially feel that way when I see images like this, where the physical Bill Cipher is attempting to break through the pages of the book. I don't know, I think there's something very scary about that. This almost omnipotent and malevolent figure masquerading as a fun cartoon character just disturbs me in ways I cannot explain. In the Book of Bill, there are many instances where we see Bill influencing our world through subliminal messaging, infomercials, cartoons, ads, and even full-on cults. When I see many of these instances of Bill influencing our world, there's just a creepy sensation I get from them, especially when you consider that Bill has the power to see through any artistic or physical depiction of his form, meaning that in every one of these images, Bill is quietly observing us. I think there's just something very horrific about that. We can never see Bill physically, but we know for a fact that he can see us, influence us, and drive us to do horrible things. The fear of the unknown regarding Bill and his appearance is much scarier to me than seeing him in reality, whether he looks like a cartoon or not. Though I'm sure seeing him pop up in real life still looks very scary regardless. Especially when you see images like this, which prove that although cartoonish, he still evokes an immense sense of fear from the viewer. But hey, maybe you're not too scared of Bill Cipher yourself. But I'd like for you to prove it. Head to Gravity Falls, Oregon yourself and go within a particular forest. There, you will find a particular looking statue. All you gotta do is shake its hand and good things will come from it.